Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Phil and this session is called Getting Started with AI Assistance for Professionals. You've probably heard all the hype about AI tools like ChatGPT or Copilot, Claude or Gemini, but wondered, okay, how do I actually use these things? If that's the case, you're in the right place. Over the duration of this video, we're going to cut through the jargon and explore what these assistants are, how they work, how to use them responsibly and effectively in your day-to-day role, and we'll look at some real examples from summarizing a marketing plan to rewriting an HR policy, and even a few creative things like generating images or writing poetry. And don't worry, you don't need to know anything about programming. This isn't a computer science lecture. It's a tour guide for smart people who just haven't had a chance to peek under the hood yet. Before we jump into the first chapter, a quick bit of housekeeping. This video is divided into several chapters, each focusing on a specific part of using AI assistants. You'll always see the current chapter name displayed at the bottom of the screen, so if you're fast forwarding or jumping ahead, you'll know exactly where we are in the video. I'll also list all the chapters and their approximate timestamps in the comments and descriptions below, so you can skip directly to what interests you the most. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can take advantage of the chapter navigation bar. Just tap or hover over the timeline to jump between sections. Now, here's the chapters we're going to cover for today. What is AI, really? A brief history, a very brief history of AI. Understanding GPT and LLMs. Don't worry, we'll get to the bottom of that. We're going to meet the major assistants, and we're going to try to understand why there are so many models out there that these assistants use. We'll look at how chat assistants work, and we'll get into some practical demonstrations. We're going to look at creative and generative AI. We'll look at some business use cases. We'll talk about what AI can't do. Then we'll get into discussion about privacy and confidentiality. We'll look at best practices and prompt strategies, the future of AI assistants, and then we're finally going to wrap up and provide you some resources. So feel free to watch this straight through or skip around depending on what's most useful to you. Either way, I hope you come away with a clear understanding of how AI assistants can help you in your professional life. So let's get started by answering the big question, what exactly is AI? So what is AI, really? Well, artificial intelligence sounds mysterious, but at its core, it's just a way for computers to do things that normally require human intelligence, like recognizing patterns, making decisions, or generating ideas. Now, if we break it down, AI is the broad goal. It's machines acting intelligently. There's another term called machine learning. Now, this is just the technique. This is teaching the machines with data instead of hard-coded rules. Then we have something called deep learning, and this is where we're using multi-layered neural networks to recognize really complex patterns like faces or voices or words. And then comes along something called large language models, or LLMs, and these are the deep learning systems that can understand and generate text. Now, you can think of this like education. Think of AI as the student. Machine learning is the study method. Deep learning is like advanced study with lots of examples. And LLMs are the, let's say, the English literature majors. You know, they've been trained on mountains of books and articles and web pages. And so by the end, these models become incredibly good at predicting what words make sense together, which surprisingly is also what makes them sound intelligent. Now, AI didn't just suddenly appear with ChatGPT. The idea dates back to the 1950s when researchers imagined that computers could think. Early decades were like teaching a toddler with flashcards. We had rule-based systems that could play checkers or do algebra, but not much more than that. Then in the 1990s and the 2000s, machine learning took over. And computers started learning patterns from examples instead of hard-coded rules. Now you fast forward to around 2017, and this is where there's a really big breakthrough, this architecture called the transformer. This made it possible to train massive models on text from across the internet. And that led to GPT, the Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And that's the start of the language model revolution. So today, LLMs don't just recognize text, although that's how they got started. But they can reason, they can summarize, they can translate, they can even joke. The progress has been exponential. It's like going from a pocket calculator to a co-writer who can write emails overnight. So let's decode what GPT really is. So it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So generative, well, that means that it can create new text, not just analyze existing text. Pre-trained, that means it's been taught from a massive library before you even talk to it. Transformer, well, now that's the neural network architecture that makes all of this possible. Think of it like an author who has read practically every book ever published, every Wikipedia page, and, a few million blogs. So when you type in a prompt, it doesn't search for an answer. What it does is it writes one based on all the patterns that it's learned. Here's a simpler way to understand it. If you start typing, "the cat sat on the blank," the model knows that statistically, based on everything that it's looked at so far, the most likely word next is going to be Matt. Now, you scale that up to entire paragraphs, and you get these human-like responses. And that's the magic. It's prediction and coherence and communication. So then who are the big players when it comes to these major AI assistants? Well, if you were to ask, and I did, if you ask the various assistants, rank the AI assistants from top to bottom, pretty much all of them put ChatGPT at the top. It does have the most market share. And it is kind of the precursor to all of this, what we're seeing today. It comes to us from OpenAI, and it's kind of famous for being friendly, flexible, and creative. Another one on the list is Claude. That's coming from Anthropic. It's maybe a little bit more cautious and thoughtful, maybe focused on safety and reasoning. And then there's Gemini, which is from Google. It's integrated deeply with the Google search and the broader Google suite of productivity tools. And then we've got Microsoft Copilot. Now, Microsoft Copilot is built on OpenAI's GPT model, but it's designed for Microsoft 365 tasks. Now, Copilot is one that's worth sort of calling out. Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI, and now it's running many of the same models inside of Word and Excel and Outlook and so on. So when you ask Copilot to summarize these emails or draft a reply, it's often using the same underlying intelligence as ChatGPT. It's just wrapped inside of Microsoft's tools. Now, each assistant has its own strengths. ChatGPT is generally considered to be more conversational and broad. Claude is, perhaps more reflective and detailed. Gemini is fast, and it's connected to the web because, let's face it, it's from Google. Copilot lives right where you work. It's embedded in your Microsoft tools. So often you can think of them as having different personalities, but they're all kind of coming from the same family tree. So why are there so many models? Well, this is where it gets maybe, interesting, if that's the right word. But, if we think about an analogy, imagine Okay, imagine you took an AI model. Now we know that they're only as good as the data they're getting trained on, right? So let's say you took one and trained it only on the works of John Steinbeck and Dr. Seuss. Nothing else. So now you ask it to write an email. Well, the only two styles it knows are Steinbeck or Seuss. So one moment it might answer, "My dear colleagues, the morning sun spills softly over the conference table as your meeting request reaches my weary soul." Right? Rather Steinbeckian. Or maybe it would reply with, "You're late, don't wait, let's coordinate." So it only can do what it knows, and it only knows what it's been trained on. So both of these responses would be grammatically correct, but both kind of also absurd in their context because the models are really just based off of what they've already read. So real models are going to be trained on trillions of words from books, from programming code, from articles, but each company will choose its own reading list. And that's why the tone differs between different AI assistants. ChatGPT sounds a little more friendly. Claude sounds a little more careful. Gemini is a bit more factual. Copilot is a bit more professional. It's really how those companies want their models to respond and appear. So it's not really about who's smarter. It's about which bookshelf they've been reading from. And this is also why you can't just ask which AI is best, because the answer really depends on what are you trying to get it to do? What do you want it to sound like? What are you trying to accomplish? And there's a good chance that there might be a model out there that works better for your specific application than others. It's not one size fits all. Okay, let's demystify a little bit what happens behind the scenes. When you're asking the AI chat bot a question or giving it a command, if you want to think of it in those terms, what you're really doing is sending it a prompt. Now, when you send a prompt, the AI breaks your words into chunks called tokens. Now, there's roughly one token for every 4 characters, roughly. And so it processes these tokens, predicts the next token, and then builds a response word by word. Each chat has a context window, and this is basically its short-term memory. The bigger the window, the more it can remember from the earlier in the conversation. Now, different assistants have different sized windows. Some can remember a few thousand words, others tens of thousands of words. Claude, for example, has a particularly large context window. But once you go past that limit, then the AI starts to forget. You think of it like a brilliant goldfish. That's why it's often smarter to start a new chat when you're going to change topics rather than dragging in the old context along for the ride. Because those tokens, well, they also determine how you're billed. If you're using a free version of one of these chat assistants, you're going to have a smaller limit. You're only allowed so many tokens over a certain period of time. If you have a paid plan or a corporate plan, well, then you're going to get longer chat windows. You're going to get more tokens. You'll probably get faster processing. But you still don't want to mix your messages inside of the same context window. If you think of it like having a brand new intern at work who's brilliant, she graduated top of the class, but it's her first day on the job. She knows nothing about the company. She knows nothing about you, but her study was excellent. And now you're about to give her some instructions. So are you better off to give her one task at a time and explain it clearly with exactly the types of results that you're expecting? Or can you just sort of jumble a whole bunch of requests together and expect that she's going to be able to sort them all out because there's a bunch of contextual background behind each of these requests? Well, I hope you would understand that the first method is going to be the most successful, and that's how you have to treat the AI chatbots. Now for some practical demonstrations. Let's talk about what these assistants can actually do. I'll describe the use cases here and you'll see the demos in action in just a moment. First up, let's talk about summarization. Imagine you've got multiple pages of a detailed marketing plan full of industry jargon and strategic buzzwords. You need to brief your boss in 30 minutes, but you don't have time to read the whole thing. You can paste that into an AI assistant and say, summarize this plan in 3 bullet points for an executive update. Within seconds, you'll get the essence, you'll get the target markets, the budget allocation, the expected ROI. All of this will be ready to go. When it comes to editing and rewriting, let's say you've got a lengthy, dense, complicated, and verbose HR policy. You can ask the AI to rewrite this in plain English so any employee can understand it. What comes back is something that is easy for anyone to read and understand, yet still has the same intent and meaning as the original. What about data extraction? Let's say you've got a 60-page legal contract and you need to find specific things like the termination clause, the notice period, and any penalty fees. You can paste that contract in and ask, extract 1. How either party can terminate, 2. Required notice period, and 3. Any financial penalties. AI will scan through all that legalese and give you a clean summary in seconds. Something it might take a paralegal several minutes or even hours to do manually. And then there's email drafting. Let's say you need to decline a meeting request politely, but you're terrible at saying no without sounding rude. So you can type in, write a polite email declining a meeting request for next Tuesday. Reason? Already triple booked. Offer to meet the following week instead. Keep it warm but professional. So AI will draft that perfectly, and you can ask it to make it more casual or more formal depending on who you're writing it to. So the power isn't in doing your thinking for you. It's in saving you time on all the grunt work so you can focus on judgment, creativity, and the work that only you can do. We're going to start off this demo using Copilot, and we're going to provide it with a fictitious marketing plan. A link to the actual documents that we're using in these demos can be found in the description of the video. First, we're going to ask Copilot to summarize this marketing plan, and Copilot makes this easy since it includes a built-in shortcut for summarizing. Next, we're going to ask it to create a concise 100-word executive summary suitable for a board presentation. In just a few seconds, it reads both the document and the prompt, and it returns exactly what we asked for. Another prompt is to summarize the plan again, but this time change the tone so it's in plain English and easier to understand. Finally, we'll ask for a more conventional upbeat tone suitable for an internal newsletter. Next, we're going to feed it a detailed but entirely fabricated HR policy. Our first request is to have it summarized into 3 bullet points. After that, we'll see how it can draft a short internal email announcing the new policy to all employees. Notice how it even includes a suggested email subject line along with the body of the message itself. Now we're providing a technical document describing a hypothetical computer network upgrade project. And we're asking Copilot to highlight the key project risks and mitigation strategies. Then we'll ask it to create a step-by-step task checklist for project managers. Next, we're giving it a fictional legal court judgment and asking it to summarize the decision into a few bullet points, highlighting the facts and issues and outcomes. Then we'll ask it to rewrite the decision so that a non lawyer could understand it and do all of this in under 150 words. Then we'll test the AI model's ability to interpret legal terminology by asking it to explain the concept of force majeure and identify the key legal principles related to it. Finally, we'll ask it to rewrite the judgment as a short article suitable for a property developer newsletter. Now, we've been doing all of this in Copilot so far, which primarily uses ChatGPT models, so ChatGPT itself would likely produce very similar results to Copilot. But let's look at what Gemini would produce when asked to summarize this same court ruling for a home buyer audience. Then we'll ask the same question of Claude. You'll notice that both Gemini and Claude provide valid and useful information, but the two results differ significantly in format and tone. For our final example, I've downloaded the complete rules for the game of curling. One set from Curling Canada, another from the World Curling Federation. For those of you who may not be familiar, curling is a winter sport played on ice, most popular in countries like Canada, Scotland, and the Nordic nations. It's also an Olympic winter sport. The World Curling Federation rules govern international and Olympic play, while the Canadian rules are designed more so for recreational and amateur leagues. We're going to give ChatGPT the two different PDFs and ask it to compare and contrast the two sets of rules and then summarize the differences. Well, and now for something maybe a little more fun. These same models, or at least their cousins in the AI family, can create art and music and images. If you've ever seen those viral pictures of dogs playing poker or surreal landscapes that never existed, that's all AI image generation in action. You can describe a character or a scene, a product concept, and watch the AI paint it instantly. But creativity isn't limited to pictures. You can ask for marketing slogans, poetry, product names, new business ideas. You can prompt it like a collaborator. Give me 5 lighthearted taglines for a coffee subscription service, for example. It's just a brainstorming partner that never sleeps. And just remember, AI generates patterns, not the truth. Use it for inspiration, and then apply your own human tastes and ethics before publishing anything. For this demo, we're going to first ask ChatGPT to generate an image of a man wearing a green hat. Then, we'll test ChatGPT's literary awareness by asking it to create an image of Ignatius J. Riley, the eccentric main character from the novel A Confederacy of Dunces. Finally, we'll take an excerpt from the novel itself, where the author describes that character in vivid detail. We'll provide that text in a new chat so there's no influence or memory from the earlier prompts, and ask ChatGPT to create an image based on that description. Now, I also gave the same assignment to Gemini, and so then we can compare the results. First, we have the man in the green hat. Next, Ignatius J. Riley. And finally, the version generated from the actual descriptive passage in the book. You can see that the more specific your prompt, the more consistent and accurate the images become across the different models. Now, what about poetry? Well, let's ask Copilot to compose a haiku. It handles the task effortlessly, short, structured, and perfectly balanced. Then, I ask it to write a poem in the style of Dr. Seuss. And then, you can ask it to create a visual to accompany the poem. You'll see that it creates something in the style of Dr. Seuss because it remembers the context of the earlier prompt. So, how does this help professionals in real life? Well, like we've seen, for emails, you can draft or summarize or polish tone instantly. For reports, you can turn messy notes into structured summaries. For meetings, you can generate minutes or follow up action items. You can use it for brainstorming, exploring ideas when you're stuck. For training, you can convert dense materials into easy explainers. So you're not replacing your judgment, you're just amplifying it. Let me give you a real world scenario. Maybe you've had a team meeting where 5 people talked for an hour about budget priorities. Now, maybe you recorded it with permission, but then you used an AI transcription service to convert that audio to text. Then you could paste that transcript into something like ChatGPT and say, read this meeting transcript, create 1, a summary of the key decisions, 2, a list of the action items with the owners, and 3, any unresolved questions that need follow-up. So in just a few minutes, you can have a meeting memo that would have taken at least 30 minutes to write manually. You could review it, make a couple tweaks, send it out while the meeting was still fresh in everybody's mind. And that's the sweet spot. Let AI do the first draft. You get to do the final judgment. Other things that it can do, for customer service, you could draft responses to common questions and then customize it for each customer. You could use it for training materials, turn technical documentation into beginner-friendly guides. Competitive analysis, summarize competitor websites and marketing materials. If you're in HR, you could create job descriptions, generate role-specific descriptions based on responsibilities, and then you can just refine that from there. Presentation preparation, you can turn bullet points into speaker's notes or vice versa. It's kind of like what I said earlier about treating your AI assistant like a highly capable intern, but one with not a lot of experience. So, you can think of this as an intern who never gets tired but still needs supervision. And that's the mindset to keep. Use AI for efficiency, not a delegation of responsibility. But you always have to review the output. Don't assume that whatever AI has generated for you is going to be 100% correct. AI can miss nuances, it can inject bias, and it can sometimes just plainly get the facts wrong. You're the editor, not a copy-paste machine. So now the other side of the coin. AI sounds smart because it's fluent, not because it's conscious. It doesn't know anything. It just predicts text. And sometimes it can do it very, very confidently and be completely wrong. Take a technical example, for instance. You could ask for the formula to calculate the deflection of a beam with a single point load. This is coming straight out of my engineering textbooks. So it'll give you the correct formula, no problem, because it's probably read that book. But if you asked it to calculate the deflection, providing that you've given it the values to substitute in, it's very likely going to get that wrong. It's a language model, not a math model, right? And so there's a good chance, it might get it right, but there's also a very good chance that it'll get it wrong. It could misplace a decimal, it could forget units, it could get the magnitude wrong. And, it's only doing symbolic patterning. It's not real math. But, what you can do in that situation is you could ask it to write a, let's say, Python program, a computer program that will perform the same calculation, and suddenly it's perfect. It's very good at language generation. So computer code is just another language. So at that point, what you're doing is you're leaving the math to the computer that's running the programming language, right? And that software. So use AI to build the tool, not to be the calculator. Another example of where AI stumbles, if you were to ask it, what is the current interest rate set by the Federal Reserve? Well, it might give you an answer. There's a pretty good chance that answer is going to be wrong, because it's based on its training data, which often has a cutoff date. If the last time it read any training information was 6 months ago, it might be able to give you the answer from 6 months ago, but not for today. Now, some assistants like Gemini or ChatGPT, if they have web browsing enabled, they can search for current information, but others can't. So you always want to check if you're asking about something time sensitive. Another big one is that AI hallucinates. So that's the technical term for when it makes things up confidently. It might cite a research study that doesn't exist, quote a legal case that never happened, or give you statistics that sound plausible but are completely fabricated. Why? Because it's predicting plausible text. It's not retrieving facts from a database. So here's the rule. Trust, but verify, especially when it comes to legal advice or citations, medical information, financial calculations, historical facts, dates, direct quotes from real people. If it matters, double check it. Here's an example of the beam deflection scenario I mentioned earlier. First, we asked ChatGPT to provide the formula for beam deflection, and it does so accurately. Then we give it some real-world values to substitute into the formula and ask it to calculate the result. It confidently shows its work and comes back with an answer of 0.5 millimeters. Okay, well, next I ask the same question of Claude. It also provides the correct formula, and using the same parameters, it calculates the deflection as 0.05 millimeters, which is a factor of 10 times smaller than the ChatGPT results. Copilot comes up with 5 micrometers, or 0.005 millimeters, which again is 10 times smaller than what Claude said. And then Gemini returns 0.05 millimeters, which happens to be the same as what Claude came up with. So it doesn't exactly inspire confidence when 4 major AI models all give essentially different numerical results. Next, we ask them to write a Python program that performs the same calculation. This is something we could use in standalone software. Now, each model produces the code easily and accurately, and so I take that code and paste it into a Python interpreter, run it, and get the correct results, which is 0.05 millimeters. So let's talk a little bit about data safety. Now, this is a big concern for professionals. So rule number one, assume that anything you share could, in theory, be seen by a human reviewer or used for training unless the provider explicitly says otherwise. Most paid enterprise versions like ChatGPT Team or Microsoft Copilot Enterprise or Claude for Business, they don't train on your data. The free versions might, though. So never paste anything confidential unless your account and vendor guarantee privacy. Don't put in client lists, internal financials, unreleased product information. And remember, every model stores some context temporarily to generate responses. So treat it like you would an email to an external consultant. Professional, but not private. So my advice, before you use any AI tool at work, check for three things. What does your company IT policy say about the AI tools? What does the AI provider's privacy policy say about your data? And is there an enterprise version with better protections? So when in doubt, anonymize. Remove names, remove specific numbers within, with ranges, generalize identifying details. You can still get very useful help without exposing sensitive information. So now that you know what AI can and can't do, let's talk technique. So good prompts make or break your results. Let me show you the difference. If you were to write something, if you were to give the prompt of write something about productivity, well, you'll get very generic advice that sounds like it came from a motivational poster, right? So you want to be very specific. You want to frame a role, right? So you might say something like, imagine that you're a time management coach. Now, write a 200-word email to a busy marketing manager explaining the 2-minute rule for handling small tasks. Use a friendly, practical tone with one concrete example. That's an example of a good prompt. It's very specific, and it's setting the tone for the type of response that you're expecting to get back. So if you think about maybe there's 4 steps, a 4-step formula for better prompts. First of all, frame that role. You're a professional editor. You're a legal assistant specializing in contracts. You're a patient teacher explaining to a beginner. This is going to prime the AI model to adopt the right perspective. Then give it some context. Who's the audience? Is it your boss? Is it a client? Is it the general public? What's the purpose? Is it to inform? Is it to persuade? Is it to simplify? What's the setting? Is it going to be formal? Is it casual? Is it for a presentation? And be specific about the format. So you can say things like, give me 3 bullet points, each 1 to 2 sentences, or write 150 words maximum, or maybe write 150 words minimum. You can say, use simple language suitable for a high school student reading level, or format this as a table with columns with the pros and the cons. The last piece of advice is iterate, don't restart. So if the first answer that it comes back with isn't quite right, you don't have to start over. You can just say, make it more formal, or shorten this by half, or add a specific example about the retail business. Remove the jargon and use everyday language, right? You can always get it to revise its output. AI remembers the conversational context, so building on previous responses is faster and more effective than rewriting your prompt from scratch. Another tip, if you're getting garbage out, chances are you're putting garbage in. So the AI can only work with whatever you give it. A precise, detailed prompt will almost always beat a vague one. You're not commanding a robot, you're collaborating with a co-writer. Now, where is all this going? Well, regardless of where it's going, one thing we know for sure is it's happening very rapidly. Models are getting multimodal. They can read images, they can listen to audio, they can watch video. We're moving towards assistants that understand everything you do on your screen. The rise of AI tools is like the Industrial Revolution in that they both represent a fundamental rapid shift in how work is done and how value is created. During the Industrial Revolution, the inventor of the steam engine and the factory machinery acted as a powerful force multiplier, allowing workers to produce goods far more quickly and in greater volume than manual labor ever could. It replaced or augmented muscle power. Similarly, AI tools act as an intelligence multiplier. They're the new machinery replacing the augmented cognitive labor, mental tasks. Just as the factory system reorganized society around machines, AI is now reorganizing industries around its capabilities. It's going to lead to massive gains in efficiency, creating new types of jobs, but it's also going to make some others obsolete. Both periods were marked by rapid technological adoption, social upheaval, dramatic increase in overall production potential. But, here's something that's already happening. AI is being integrated into the tools that you're using every day, whether you knew it or not. Google Docs has AI writing features. Microsoft Office has Copilot embedded. Zoom can transcribe and summarize meetings. Slack can draft responses. Even your email client probably has some AI in it by now. So this isn't just a standalone chat anymore. It's becoming part of your everyday workflow. It's your skill, your judgment, and your taste that still matters. AI just gives you the leverage. It's the new calculator for knowledge work. So instead of worrying about replacement, focus on augmentation. Harness the power, leverage it, understand it, and use it. The people who will thrive are the ones who learn to work alongside these tools, not the ones who resist them or blindly trust them. Well, that's it for this little session. We learned what AI and LLMs are. We learned how different assistants behave, what they can and can't do, and how to use them safely and effectively. I've shown you some practical examples from summarizing reports to generating images, and we've learned how to structure your prompts for better results. Remember, AI is not going to replace your expertise, it amplifies it. The value isn't in getting answers faster, it's in freeing up your time for higher value thinking. If you'd like to keep exploring, check the links in the description below for some other resources. Thank you for watching Getting Started with AI Assistants for Professionals. If you found this helpful, consider sharing it with a colleague who's just starting out. Maybe click like. And remember, you don't have to master AI overnight. You just have to start using it today.